Welcome to The Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1, where we challenge the assumptions of our current society to resist oppression and investigate alternative ways of living, for a world based on justice, solidarity and sustainability. Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. It is your local community radio station that you are listening to, and it is great to have you with us. My name is Andy, and we are broadcasting on Yagara and Turrbal country. Today we're going to talk about a couple of recent campaigns against weapons manufacturers around this country, and there are a number of them, and of course there's always pushes by those who make money off the weapons and the politicians who like both the money and the influence. And so the weapons manufacturing industry is always looking to grow, and it's up to us, the humans, the ones who remember the human cost of these weapons, that what their end product is somebody's devastation and war and the furthering of conflict that ultimately harms us all. You know, when the world is in conflict, it stops us working on the things that are really pressing for all of our survival, whether that's the climate crisis or just better ways to live as humans. And we need to work for a peaceful world that it can enable a flourishing of you and me, but also people that we'll never meet in other parts of the world who are the collateral damage of the profits of this industry. And so people have been resisting the weapons industry, and we're going to hear from a couple of them today. I spoke to Safaa Rayan, who is a Palestinian woman based in Wollongong in New South Wales, about the campaign that they have just done. They've done a 72-hour non-stop blockade picket of Bisalloy, a Wollongong company that's part of the weapons industrial complex. And then I spoke to Zelda Grimshaw from Wage Peace, who they had a long-running campaign against F-35 fighter jets, and I never covered it at the time, and so I thought I'd go back and hear about what they did all around the country. There's lots of different actions, and really trying to find spots where you can target little cracks where you might be able to find a way to exert some influence on these massive companies and their never-ending appetite for growth and their never-ending influence on our politics. And so that is what's coming up. At the end of the show, if we've got time, we might hear a bit about the long-running Brisbane campaign against Boeing, which happens every Wednesday. There's a vigil outside the Boeing building in the city, keeping that company, one of the world's biggest weapons manufacturers, keeping them accountable. But for now, let's start off by hearing from Safaa.
My name is Safaa Rayan. I am a local Illawarra woman. I live on Darawal land, and I'm a member of Wollongong Friends of Palestine, and I am a social worker. And
you've been busy, Wollongong Friends of Palestine, recently with a long picket of Bisalloy. Before we get into that specific action, do you want to tell us a bit about Bisalloy and what they do?
Yeah, so Bisalloy is the only company in the Southern Hemisphere which provides the tempered steel that goes to mining, or it goes to making, it's basically militarized steel. Yeah. So Bisalloy make the tempered steel that goes to Raphael and Plasan Round, who then make the armoured tanks and Merkavas that Israel uses in their genocide against the Palestinians, and now we're seeing in Lebanon.
And so there's a bit of a history in Wollongong there of people resisting Bisalloy. How long have the protests there been going on?
Yeah, so we've been picketing at Bisalloy for the past 2.5 years. We started off with very small actions where it was, closing down the morning shift during the week. And then over time, it has become a real movement where we have people coming in from interstate even, Brisbane, Melbourne, Canberra, Newcastle, and all over the Illawarra and Sydney. And our latest picket was 72 hours. It was a real success. We managed to shut them down for 3 days, disrupting their operations.
Yeah, so that was just last weekend. You did a 72-hour vigil outside and picket. And what was that like?
Yeah, look, Sunday night was raining when we turned up. So we turn up at 8 p.m. on a Sunday night because their first shift starts at 11 p.m. Sunday, where they turn the furnace on, getting ready for Monday morning. It started off in the rain. We always tend to have a really great vibe, but this time Bisalloy decided to call in the riot squad from Sydney. So they were not local police, and it did have a bit of an impact on our vibe. We normally have a very loving, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of a Woodstocky type vibe, where there's lots of music, there's lots of food, there's lots of people setting up tents and camping equipment. But this time the vibe was a little bit tense.
Yeah, right. Did the riot squad intervene at all in you being there?
Yeah, they tried because we were given some information that Bisalloy was going to try and bring in a bus load of workers. So the workers weren't going to come in their own vehicles. They were going to come in via a Bisalloy operated bus. And so, we were going to hold the picket line. So we kind of blocked the road at that point. And it was, if anybody knows where Bisalloy is, it's at the end of a cul-de-sac. So it tends to be a very quiet street. We were quite lucky, I think, because David Shoebridge was there that day and he intervened with police. So we were lucky this time with David Shoebridge being there, discussing with police their obligations towards us and him. And, that kind of meant that Bisalloy didn't bring their busload of workers for that first night. And
so would they normally be working around the clock and you've stopped them for 72 full hours?
Correct. Yes, they tend to have 3 shifts a day. The shifts are 6 a.m., 3 p.m., and then I think 9 p.m. during the week. And so we managed to stop, I think, maybe 9 shifts in that week.
Yeah, well done. And my own experience of these kind of events is that they're also great community building kind of events, like you said, good vibe and just a chance to get to know each other, share food and things like that. There must have been plenty of opportunities for some chats over the course of 72 hours.
Absolutely. So we also do workshops. David Shoebridge did do a workshop on the Sunday night, and then, on Tuesday morning we had an abolitionist workshop where we talked about, abolishing the incarceral, what people would know as the justice system, which doesn't seem very just a lot of the time. We had DJs, we had live music performances, film screenings, and I was involved in a workshop with a wonderful woman called Tanya, who lives in a refugee camp in Lebanon. And, we discussed the right to resist and the right to return for Palestinians and what that looks like. There was a lot of community engagement. We even had a lantern parade where children at about 6 p.m. on Monday or Tuesday night, where children from the Illawarra had made lanterns and came after school and paraded their lanterns. It was such a joyful moment. Apart from police interactions, every other interaction was joyful and loving, and in the spirit of community, and in the spirit of what we want for our children, we want for children all over the world.
Yeah, and that kind of direct action of going to the place where the weapons are made, it can be quite empowering, hey, in a situation where otherwise you're far away from where the bombs are falling, you're not sure what you can do. Is that a feature of that kind of direct action tactic?
So it really was. So I don't talk very much about my losses in Palestine. And, sitting in that space, feeling safe amongst people who empathize, I was able to, there was an interaction I had with a police officer from the riot squad. And, this is Wednesday morning. They're giving out stupid infringements for cars being unlocked or for crossing the road. He came towards us and started asking some questions. And then I felt the need to say to this police officer why we were at Bisalloy. Because he's upholding these systems by giving out stupid infringements. And I explained how I have family in Gaza and how we've lost so many people over the last 2 years. And I felt safe doing that because I felt empowered doing that because I had all my friends sitting with me, and I drew off their power. And, it actually I hope it made some difference with that police officer, because he did seem to feel or look a little bit emotional. But in any other circumstance, I wouldn't actually speak to a police officer, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's interesting, Wollongong at the moment, it's a place with a great history of anti-war resistance, but at the moment it is, as well as Bisalloy being there, there's sort of talk of having an AUKUS submarine base there in the Illawarra. Is this sort of part of the movement as well, and what it focuses on, this militarisation, I guess, of your region?
Yeah, absolutely. We, as part of Wollongong Friends of Palestine, as part of the picket, we also have Wollongong Against Weapons and Nukes, WAWAN. And they're big supporters of Wollongong Friends of Palestine, and Wollongong Friends of Palestine are also big supporters of WAWAN. We work together collaboratively to say no nuclear subs off Port Kembla. Why ruin our beautiful shoreline with potentially detrimental weaponry that does not privilege the community or anyone in Australia? It actually puts us in harm's way more than it benefits us. So, yeah, absolutely. Saying no to nuclear subs off the coast of Port Kembla through AUKUS is something that we do stand firm against. So,
it was a big effort, I'm sure, to be out there day and night in the cold south coast air. But what comes next for the campaign against Bisalloy?
Yeah, look, what comes next is more pickets, more disruption of the industrial military complex in which we are a part of. This is part of the supply chain of the industrial military complex. And we will continue to say no Illawarra Steel for genocide, no Illawarra Steel for military weaponry. And, you know, if it means moving to bigger targets, then that, so be it. But at the moment, we will have our debrief meeting this weekend, and then we will look at the next steps. But, you know, there will be more actions. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for chatting with us today, Safaa.
Well, thank you.
We were just speaking with Safaa Rayan from Wollongong, Friends of Palestine, about their 72-hour picket blockade of Bisalloy, and a great effort. And I'm sure it was quite an amazing thing to be a part of. Those rolling actions, you know, they're really amazing for building community, making friends, and building the power, you know, that we have as ordinary people. And so good on them. I'm sure it was also a bit chilly in the night down there in Wollongong. But that city has a great history of anti-war activism and anti-nuclear activism. And of course, the most famous intervention into a war was when the wharfies at Port Kembla, the docks, refused to export iron ore to Japan in the lead up to World War II, after Japan had invaded China, refusing to facilitate that country's, fascist expansion. And of course, it was broken famously by the Attorney General and future Prime Minister Robert Menzies, passing a law to allow unqualified workers to work on the docks to break the strike. But the resistance, you know, from not just those unionists, but when Menzies went down there were all people blocking his car, all kinds of things. That community, you know, really asking the question of what do we want our community's contribution to the world to be? Do we want it to be for war or for peace? And the people of Wollongong are still asking those questions and still getting out there, you know, trying to be proactive in fighting for peace. And as we heard from Safaa, it's about potentially nuclear submarines there as well, as part of if they ever come, you know, well, Australia might never get them, but America will certainly want to dock their nuclear submarines in Australia and in that city, Wollongong. And it'd be really interesting to watch the people there and what they do with that, because there is a really active anti-AUKUS group trying to resist that, as well as in Western Australia at the Stirling submarine base as well. Same thing, you know, a lot of local people that are really trying to resist. And I think it's interesting. That's where we find our power in a lot of ways in these big global issues. It's hard to know what we can do as an individual or small group of people, but when the points where it becomes localised is actually where we can intervene in it. And so that's what they've been doing in Wollongong. And it's also been a way that people have been trying to intervene in the slaughter of Palestinian people and now Lebanese people over the last few years in the Middle East, is by finding local companies that play some role in the making of the weapons used. In Brisbane, particularly, it was Ferra that people have really been targeting with blockade pickets, much like that Bisalloy one. Also HTA, who does the treatment of that steel. And across the country recently, there has been a long mobilisation against the F-35 Joint Strike Fighters that has been coordinated by Wage Peace. And I did speak to Zelda Grimshaw from Wage Peace about that campaign. Let's have a listen.
Yeah, g'day. My name's Zelda. I'm an activist with Wage Peace.
And Wage Peace is a anti-militarist organisation that has been active recently with a campaign against the F-35s. To start off with, do you want to tell us what are F-35s?
So F-35s is the United States kind of signature bomber aircraft or fighter jet. It's been used extensively in the annihilation of Gaza. Was also used against Venezuela when they abducted the president. It was also used against Iran. It's an incredibly expensive machine, like $250 million per aircraft. And part of the strategy the United States has rolled out to create the F-35 is to implicate all these other countries and companies in its manufacture. So it's owned by Lockheed Martin, and Lockheed Martin has basically offshored a whole lot of the weapons production for this huge, destructive aircraft to a whole range of smaller companies in Australia, in Canada, all over the world, including over 70 companies in Australia.
And in recent years, people have unearthed a bunch of these companies and done protests against them. Do you want to give us a bit of a history before the most recent mobilisation of what that resistance to the F-35s has looked like?
Well, the F-35 became a focus for the pro-Palestine movement all around the world. It was fantastic to see such an uprising of anti-militarist activism and the unity of strategy around the world to try to stop the F-35 components. So the F-35 cannot fly without all the parts that are made in Australia, all the parts that are made in Canada or France or Germany. So it gives people a real opportunity to disrupt the supply chain and to ground the fleet. Like if you can stop the export of a particular weapons part, you can ground the fleet. The pro-Palestine movement here in Australia was pretty focused on stopping a supply of components to the F-35. In Naarm, down where I live, there were repeated pickets at factories. There's been factory gate lock-ons, factory roof climb-ons. I certainly haven't seen in my lifetime weapons companies exposed to this level of direct action before. So it's been, really heartening to see how powerfully people are prepared to act to stop a genocide.
Now, those actions in recent years have been kind of decentralised around the country, but more recently, Wage Peace decided to organise a kind of coordinated campaign against the F-35s. Can you tell us what that looked like?
Sure. Well, we decided we'd try a new thing, a big thing, and try to run a series of 3 mobilisations. The idea is that each wave of the mobilisation, you bring in more people, you upskill more people, and you build momentum. We ran the first wave in October 2025, the second wave not long after it in December 2025, and the third wave in March 2026. So it was 3 waves of three different mobilisations, but on the same target over a 6-month period.
So these actions happen in a variety of different places and with different tactics. I guess most notably was the kind of interventions with people on roofs and locking themselves to gates and things like that. But can you tell us a bit more about what tactics were used?
Well, in a distributed organising campaign like this, where we're really wanting to build movement power, we developed a series of workshops about tactics so that people could inform themselves. This is what this tactic might look like. This is some of the ingredients you might need if you want to do an intervention at an MP's office, or if you want to do a sort of street theatre type thing, or if you want to do a direct action that involves a lock-on or a ladder or a rooftop. So we ran all those trainings and workshops in the build-up to the mobilisations. And for me, that was probably the most rewarding part of the mobilisation, were those sessions where we got face-to-face contact with activists around the continent and sharing skills, and, just all sorts of surprising things come up when you empower people and give people space to contribute what they know. So the range of tactics used was really diverse. In the first wave, we had a couple of factory roof sit-ins. We had a couple of factory gate pickets. We had a protestival in Naarm where we brought down a sound system, and we cooked on site, and there were clowns, and we also disrupted traffic into Leonardo, another supplier of warplanes to Israel. A lot of people like going to their MPs' offices. So, a round of those actions happened.
So that was the first wave of the mobilisation, and the second wave was mostly in Newcastle, I believe.
Yeah, so the second wave, we zeroed in on Mullumbimba, Newcastle, and that is really the hub of F-35 production in Australia. It's where the Williamtown RAAF base is, and it's where the Lockheed Martin and the BAE warehouses are. And those are all, Williamtown has its own base, but BAE and Lockheed Martin are at Newcastle Airport, where they are also developing a whole new weapons precinct that they've bizarrely called Astro Aero Lab. I mean, it's just a completely made-up name to make it sound like it's kind of, about space or something, but it is 100% putting public money into developing facilities for weapons corporations. So we were in Mullumbimba for a week. We did a cycle around the weapons precinct, including the Lockheed Martin and the BAE warehouses, which is where all these F-35 parts are stored before they get shipped out. So weapons parts from all over Australia end up there, and then they get shipped from the RAAF base. So, we cycled all over that precinct and led the police on a merry chase around roundabouts and things like that. That was really lovely. I've got a long history of activism on bicycles, so that was really fun for me. They have the Minister for Defence Industries in Mullumbimba, Pat Conroy, so we went to his place a couple of times. We also protested at the council, who are giving public money to the new weapons precinct development. And we went to two of the weapons corporations. So someone got on the roof at Lockheed and shut that facility down for a few hours. And a couple of women got on the roof of New Press, which is one of the F-35 components manufacturers in Mullumbimba, and danced on the roof. And there was a big support crew, and the police brought in a cherry picker, and that was again quite a carnival atmosphere. So if folks are listening and thinking, oh, direct action, that's really hardcore, it's not necessarily. Like, it can be quite joyous. And of course we prioritise safety and well-being, because that's what we're all about, is actually preserving life and having a life that we can celebrate.
And the most recent mobilisation was, I guess, the most distributed, it seemed, across the country. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, in the third wave, we went after the people exporting the weapons. So there were two sort of tranches of actions around that, and one was around the defence officials who actually sign off on these export permits. So although the Australian government keeps saying we don't supply weapons to Israel, well, actually we do. And we are supplying weapons directly to Israel, not even via the United States or some other pretext. We are supplying weapons directly to Israel. And somebody is signing those pieces of paper. So through David Shoebridge's interventions in Senate estimates, we were able to identify who is actually signing those pieces of paper. And we went to defence departments in various cities with sort of cardboard cutout masks and asking, whose hand signed the paper, who is signing these death warrants for Palestinians and now Iranians as well. We didn't get any response from the Defence Department other than kicking us off the premises, but we did make it known who these people are. Their names, their faces are now in the public domain in a way that they weren't before. And I guess our charge to them is, we will see you in The Hague. These crimes may well end up in The Hague in 5 to 10 years' time. So people like Nockels and Diebels and the other defence officials who are signing off on these death warrants may well end up in The Hague for their role in facilitating genocide. The other target we went after in Wave 3 was Thai Airlines, surprisingly. So through some excellent journalism, I think it was Declassified Australia broke the story that Thai Air has been directly shipping weapons parts to Israel. So they're getting transported from the RAF base in Newcastle to Sydney Airport, loaded onto Thai Airways, and Thai Airways then sends them to Bangkok. And then Thai Air actually has a code share with Israel's flagship airline. So then they go directly from Bangkok to an airbase in Israel. So Thai Air's, we felt like, was a great target because it's a commercial airline and their image is, smooth as silk. Like, they're this gentle, lovely airline that facilitates holidays in beautiful tropical Thailand. And here they are actually carrying weapons parts to a genocide. So this was a great example of how an action that might feel really inconsequential at the time can have roll-on effects that you never anticipated. So a group of about 20 people held a banner in Federation Square in Nam saying Thai Air flies death. And we broke that story that Thai Air is shipping weapons parts to Israel. And it got picked up by Free Palestine Thailand. So, I sought that collaboration, and Free Palestine Thailand picked it up. And then it got picked up by a couple of really big influencers in Thailand. And so the story was suddenly out to millions and millions of people who follow those influencers. It became quite a big story in Thailand. It got to the point where Thai Air felt like they had to put out a disclaimer. So they put out something lame like, we don't endanger our passengers. And it's like, no, it's not your passengers. It's the people in Palestine that you're endangering by shipping these weapons.
Now, it does seem that all these campaigns against weapons companies have had some success. The government doesn't look like it wants to give much away, but we have heard that there have been some restrictions put on weapons companies exporting to Israel.
Yes, we did get the information gradually that all the weapons suppliers, all the F-35 suppliers had received a memo from the Department of Defence saying, do not export directly to Israel. Some of them still went ahead and did that. But interesting that they are feeling vulnerable on this point, that our activism was shaking them up a bit. So never think that your activism is ineffective. Even that small action at Federation Square had these ripple effects we could not have predicted. And then we went to the airport. We went to Thai Airways at the airports and handed out flyers to people who were in line at the checkout at Thai Air, and passengers going, what? There might be weapons under my seats? And there might be.
Well, it was a big triple mobilisation against the F-35s, but I'm wondering what comes next for Wage Peace.
Look, it was a huge effort, and that comes on top of basically 2 years of non-stop campaigning against the weapons corporations who are supplying the genocide in Gaza. We're all on a little bit of a reassess and reconvene at the moment. A bunch of us are heading to Pine Gap for the convergence in Pine Gap and looking to do some interesting theatre up there. Yeah, who knows? Who knows? And if you would like to be part of what comes next, we are really welcoming to new folks. We're always welcoming new folks into the fold. So info@wagepeaceau.org, or find us on social media, WagePeaceAU, and get in touch. We'd love to meet you.
All right. Thanks very much, Zelda, for having a chat with us.
All right, Andy. Cheers.
We just heard Zelda Grimshaw from Wage Peace about the campaign against the F-35 fighter jets that's gone on across this country. Great effort by lots of local groups, standing up to a huge company and the huge drive for war. And I think it really shows when these different groups coordinate together, it can have an impact, and it has had an impact on the ability of Australian companies to sell weapons to a site of, a terrible slaughter of innocent civilians, which is what has happened over recent years in that region, and ethnic cleansing of a people group in their homeland. We have been talking about weapons resistance on the show today, and the last little bit I want to play is an interview I actually did a year ago with Margie Pestorius outside the Boeing building in the city, where every week a group of local Brisbane people gathers together on a Wednesday lunchtime, and they just stand there with signs, just bear thorn in the side of Boeing, as those workers, many thousands of workers there, go about their days. Most Boeing workers work in the weapons industry rather than civilian aeroplanes, and so we'll just play this to touch base just in Brisbane with local people here who are resisting the weapons companies in our city.
Come your masters of war, you that build the big guns, you that build the death planes, you that build all the bombs.
Every Wednesday for over a year, a group of people have gathered outside the Boeing building in Albert Street in Brisbane CBD. They are there to picket one of the world's biggest weapons companies to remind the staff there of the role Boeing is playing in Israel's decimation of Gaza. Recently, to mix things up, the group did a sing-out, different people taking the mic to perform versions of Bob Dylan's classic anti-military industrial complex anthem, Masters of War. I went along and spoke to activist Margie Pestorius about the weekly protests.
You that hide behind walls, you that hide behind death, I just want you to know I can see through your mask.
So, Margie, we're out the front of the Boeing building here in Albert Street in the Brisbane CBD, and people have been coming here every week for over a year. Why have people been consistently coming here to protest?
Because Boeing is a weapons company, and we want people to remember that Boeing is a weapons company, and it's heavily implicated in the trade of weapons to Israel. They're enabling the killing of thousands and thousands of people just like you and me, men, women, children, and it's doing that through a trade into America and from America to Israel. And there's also weapons made here in Brisbane. So there's two things going on. One is these wing kits that go with bombs. They're like little add-ons that you have to a dumb bomb to make it a smart bomb. They made them here in Queensland. They're designed and made here in Brisbane. We have those potentially going direct to Israel. But we also know that Boeing is the major profiteer.
So what's the virtue of a weekly protest coming back every week?
Well, we've handed about 6,000 leaflets, so we get to gauge what's going on in the community. We get to see the ground shift. we get to see the look in people's eyes as they take those leaflets, and it mightn't seem like much, but it does give us real life information about how people feel about this genocide. And I think you can see that now, especially when we started talking about the starvation, that people are very much on side and they know genocide and they understand what it means. And it's also important as a belonging space. I think in activism, people need a landing space or a place they can get to know people, a place they can learn about the issues. And this leafleting we do, which is sort of a mixture of leafleting and speeches, it enables people to learn some of the very basics of street protest. The gun in my hand, and hard from my eyes, turn and run forever, and the fast bullets fly.
What have the interactions been like with Boeing staff?
Well, Boeing staff tend to sneak out the back, which is one of the reasons we like to cover two different doors. And if we're out the back, we can stop them sneaking out the back. But generally, they just sort of skulk on by with their T-shirts. And their T-shirts are interesting because on one side they say they're from Boeing, on the other side they say what program they're from. And there's 7 or 8 or 9 Boeing programs here in this building. We've heard up to 1,500 workers. But what we do see here lunchtime is a lot of other engineers. Arup is in this building. Rio Tinto is nearby. So you see a lot of engineers, and you can speak to engineers as earth care, not warfare. The engineers should be engineering for earth care and not for warfare, and try and split the engineering community against the weapons industry.
And so today there's a sing out of the Bob Dylan classic Masters of War. Tell us about that.
Masters of War is something that we have each week here because one of our member thinks it's an important message and a great song. So we just thought today we tried to get people to come and sing different versions. So we had 4 or 5 different versions being sung from people in the community, and part of that is helping people to understand that part of street protest is expressions of people power expressions. So that includes singing and dancing, or learning to chant or learning to sing together.
Come you masters of war, you that build the big guns, you that build the death plane, you that build all the bombs, you that hide behind walls, you that hide behind desks. I just want to know I can see through your masks.
You are listening to 4ZZZ. Just there you heard a little story that I made on site at the Boeing protest last year. Of course, they're still going. They've hardly missed a week in over 2 years of protesting outside of that building. And just one example of many we've heard about in the show today of people finding in their local region the places that are involved in some of the conflicts that we see going on in the world. Not all of them are very equal conflicts, and the companies that benefit from the destruction there and wanting to intervene, wanting to do our little part for making it that much harder to profit from war and export weapons to go and kill people on the other side of the world that are just like us, just want to live a fulfilling life, be around friends and family, go to work, things like that. Most of the people that are affected by these wars. And so, it's amazing, these stories, they don't necessarily get told. The war is always a news story, but ordinary people getting together to try to stop war is not what mainstream media considers newsworthy. And so it's up to our community media like 4ZZZ to spread the word of this kind of action and to encourage people to get involved in making the kind of world that we want to see. Not the important people, you know, who get all the media attention, all the money behind them. The average people like you and me that are just using our creativity and our time and our physical bodies to get in the way of all the terrible things that you see happening in the world. That is all we have time for on The Paradigm Shift. See you next week.